Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Father's Friday. I'm your host, Brian Anderson, and I'm joined by my good friend, Ken Frazier. He is a coach, an entrepreneur, a dad, an author. He's got a lot of hats, to say the least, much like many of the guests we have on this show. But we met a few years ago, and his company and work is focused on being fully human. So I am thrilled to have him on the show and talk for a bit.
Thanks for having me, Brian. I always love our conversations, and I'm such a huge fan of you and your work. And, we're all just
Stop
fathering
it.
together.
Stop it. But yeah, thank you. Glad to have you on just to make me feel better about myself and the work I do. But no, in all seriousness, we're in for a treat over the next 15 minutes as we dive into the work you do professionally, the work you do as a dad, and the tips you have for folks that might be listening in. So, yeah, let's just dive straight into it. And, fatherhood is a major part of your life, and I'm just curious, like, what does that look like for you, and how do you balance the entrepreneurial life that you have with the children that look up to you?
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. What fatherhood looks like for me is I'm a solo dad and co-parent. I share custody 50% of the time I have a 9-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And their mom and I reorganized our family 6 years ago, 6.5 years ago, when they were 1 and 3. So I've been a solo dad, co-parent, entrepreneur for the last 6 years,
Mhm.
and it has been the one of the most challenging jobs I've ever loved. I'll say it that way.
That is a great way of saying it. Yes, it is. In some ways, it really is a job, and I think oftentimes we think about parenthood on so many levels, but I don't know if we often frame it as a job because we don't get paid, we don't have, a clock in, clock out kind of life.
Yeah.
Uh, but now, after, post pandemic, when so many of us work remote, I think a lot of that has shifted anyway. I'm just curious, like, do your kids know you see it as a job, or how does it, like, I'm just curious, like, to dive deeper into that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I
framework. Yeah.
appreciate it's great, great question. Well, once upon a time, I didn't see it as a job, right? I thought the real work was done out there. I mean, I grew up in a very loving traditional family. Dad went out in the world to work, mom ran the household. So that's what I just kind of was steeped in. Um, and what I've come to learn from my own experience of having to hold both of those roles as the job, having the job of running a home, and having to go out in the world and work in a way to take care of the home, having to wear both of those hats, I would say unequivocally that the work of running a home is as much, if not more, um, energetically intensive, emotionally intensive, logistically intensive. It takes a lot.
Yeah.
And so I was just in a conversation with someone the other day about this, even though it was so hard for me and it brought up a lot of challenges and growth edges for me, I have a fundamentally different relationship with parenting, with my kids, understanding and having empathy towards moms and women in a way that I never fully appreciated before. So,
Sure.
so I've been humbled and have garnered a ton of respect for the women who have bared much of the work, if you will, or the job of running a home.
Yeah, and I'm sure for those that are listening that are going through divorce or thinking of that divorces in their future, could you talk a little bit about, take it back 6 years just to do how you've evolved, to balance those expectations, right? Because it's not like things just go away, or things magically appear after a divorce, right? All those things were there, like as you were as mentioning, and I'll own it, my own mistakes as a husband. We had a bill on the counter, and I got ready to throw it away. And my wife said, I need to pay that first. Hold on. And I said, I thought this was on auto pay. And she was like, no, I've been paying them for the last 13 years. And I said, eating my words, because I genuinely thought we had set everything up to auto pay, right? And I've I lived alone, right? I paid bills. I know how the monthly cycles go. And here I was stepping my foot right into the trap of a stereotypical traditional marriage or whatnot. So curious, like how you've weathered that, and if you have strategies for dads to maybe prevent a divorce talk by stepping up a bit more, so to
Well,
speak.
it's look, we all come from our own respective families of origin, cultures of origin, and from our own upbringings, we come with, we're programmed in a way. We're
Sure.
conditioned to have certain wants, needs, and expectations. And what happens invariably is two people come together in this thing we call marriage, each person having an understanding of who they think they are, who they think the other person is, how they think it's going to go. And no one gets those needs met.
Right.
That doesn't play out for either party. And so here you have two people, neither of whom is getting what they thought they were going to get. And now we actually have to start having the real conversations about who we are, who are we becoming, and how do we navigate the messiness. Like being humans messy, being in relationships is messy, being a parent is messy.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I had to overcome is like I don't like mess.
Sure.
So being willing to be in the hard conversations with myself, with my partner, with my kids. So willingness to be messy and
Right.
and be in it is one, and a tolerance for that. One of the other harder things that I bumped up against, taking this back to work or a job, is I had rage unlike anything I'd ever experienced before, and it came out in the most blunt language that I can remember: is this isn't my effing job.
Right.
Well, yeah, it is, Kent, because now you're a single dad and it is your effing job. And so I can choose to continue to rail and engage the intensity, and anger is a strong, potent, thing that one can actually become addicted to.
Right. Right.
And so I hired a coach because I didn't want to spill my rage and my anger all over my kids. Um, and so I hired a coach, and one of the practices he gave me is, as I feel that the intensity of that anger or rage come up, I have to transmute that into some kind of character or turn it into art in some way.
Yeah.
So I've written songs about dragons. I've become dragons or bears or whatever, and it moves that energy in a more constructive, creative, and playful way.
Hmm.
Yet I
Right.
can
Yeah.
still say, like, hey, Daddy Bear's angry because I've asked you 4 times to stop hitting your sister. Rah! Right? Rather than actually making a more aggressive move.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I
And I
love
had to
that.
learn.
Yeah.
I really had to
Of
learn
course.
how to play with those energies and not let, we named it the takeover. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, before you know it, I'm screaming and sweaty and like, okay, like you got to find a way to move a little differently with that energy. And for me, that was turning it into songs, turning it into art, turning it into characters, turning it into a child's book about, we all have these various dragons that we have to learn how to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. And your book is phenomenal. I will make sure the links are provided below for folks, just to put in a quick plug for it, even though, that wasn't your intent, I'm sure. But
No, 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 no. That's more a coping strategy. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, yeah,
and how do I teach? I get this in my coaching work all the time. People say, Ken, I wish I would have learned, the stuff you're teaching as a kid. And,
yeah,
and much of that is just learning that we're all fully human, imperfectly, as my shirt says. We
yeah.
all
I
have
love the
our
shirt.
angelic superpowers and gifts, and we all have these darker qualities that we have to learn to love and integrate, because making them try to go away only has them come back stronger and unhealthier forms later on. So it's not about disowning those parts of ourselves. It's about actually learning to love ourselves fully. And as we do that, we become more able to extend that same grace to other people. And there's less nonsense in the world, like what we
Yeah,
saw happen a couple days ago to our former president.
right.
Whatever
I,
your, opinions of him are not, like, I don't want to live in a country where that's how we resolve differences of perspectives.
right. Right. 100%. Well, and what's that teach our children, right? Like you can't just shut down stuff, right? We live in community and uh I often talk with my kids about framing it, our chores, our tasks as like we all win together when we work together, right? And
Work
how do
makes the
we
dream
overcome
work,
that?
baby.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of kids, let's shift a little bit with the time we have remaining. We've often talked in previous conversations about how we see, client time. Clients are paying us, right? So we have to show up, be present. Our kids aren't paying us. If anything, they are sucking more stuff out of us for free, right? So and we pay them. But how do you make sure your kids know at the end of the day that they're like that your time with them is so precious? And
Yeah.
yeah, let's
Well,
start there. Yeah,
so we have some patterns and routines, practices, rituals, whatever one wants to label these things are. In the messiness of parenting, getting kids out the door to school or to wherever we have to go, getting kids to brush teeth and get pajamas on and get like settle and get to bed. These can tend to be um, moments where I'll just own it, where I can become more prone to agitation.
sure.
And so as I'm in the morning trying to get everyone through the paces to get out the door, we take a couple minutes, whether it's 30 seconds or 2, 3, 4 minutes, and we do couch cuddles.
Nice.
Just gather on the couch. I get one kid under each arm and we just sit and I hug them and I tell them how much I love them and I kiss on them and we just, connect and regulate before we sprint out the door.
Yeah,
Similarly at bedtime, they come into my room. I got candles on, I got incense on, the lights are dim, and I have one of them laying on either side of me. And we just cuddle and talk and just downshift together until we're all just about asleep. Sometimes we fall asleep together. And then it's like, okay, I wake them back up when we tuck them back into their beds.
yeah, I
Is
love
that,
that.
just connecting, quieting, regulating with each other.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've just talked, as adults, we need to regulate just as much as we need and set the example to our children as much as we tell them to regulate. And by having that couch cuddle or and for those listening, whatever you want to call it, right? Like you
Yeah.
probably don't have a monopoly on that term, but however you can like role model and practice that with your kids. I know I often will put myself in timeout, especially when my girls were younger. I would say, all right, daddy made a mistake. I've got a timeout ahead of me. And letting them know I'm not above the rules either, right? Like it may
Yeah,
be my house or my wife and I's house, but we're all in this together, right?
totally. I'll
Yeah,
similarly, I'll say, hey guys, I'm noticing I'm getting edgy, I'm getting agitated. I, I've had a long day. You're not doing anything bad or wrong. I just need to take a couple minutes. I'm going to go upstairs, do some yogas, meditate for a little bit. And they're like, okay.
yeah, yeah.
And then
Do
they
they
like,
have
hey, I need space. Like when they're getting agitated, they say, hey, I just need some space. Okay, great. Like go take your space.
do they have like a meditation room in their or a spot in their bedrooms for them to be able to do that, or is that kind of
Um,
up to them?
they're not up to that yet.
Okay.
They more just go up and they just chill. They'll put on some music or read or
Yeah.
tablet management's another thing. We
Yeah. Yeah.
that's a fun conversation in and of itself.
That is. Well, we maybe we'll say that have you come back in a few weeks or months to another Father's Friday. We could talk tablet management and screen time and
Yeah,
productive versus not
right.
uses of that. Yeah. Um, but as we've talked about, like you're an entrepreneur, you're a coach, you work with lots of different people. I'm just curious, like as we close out, what is a great way for people to work with you, or how can they get involved in being fully human, imperfectly or not?
Yeah, no, no, beautiful. So our website, paradoxedge.com, talks all about who we are, what we're up to. We have an upcoming free workshop on July 24th,
Yep.
inviting people to come and explore our various edge. What's the edge of myself in all the roles I have at work, as parent, as partner? What's my edge of health? What's my edge around money? What's my edge around my work? So, come and join us as we're all, I think, reevaluating
Yeah.
our wants and needs and roles and how we engage
Yeah.
with.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to include those links and everything for folks to check that out. Um, well, we've wasted 15 minutes of our lives again, Kent, with great conversation. I'm just curious, we always end on a dad joke, so I'd love to give you the floor and lay one on us.
Oh, all right. Well, this one seems to be popular among people I know. Why are giraffes' necks so long?
To reach the leaves. I don't know.
That's a good answer. And it's
Sure.
it's actually a little more simple than that. It's because their heads are so far away from their body.
Uh, I will have to use that on my kids. Thank you. That is a good one. I love it.
Yes,
And they love
enjoy that
giraffes.
one and
So,
all the shrapnel that comes your way.
well, Kent, thank you for being here. All of you that are listening, thank you for joining us again. Until next week, have a lovely Father's weekend. Use that dad joke to your heart's content, and we will see you all again next week. Thanks, Kent. Bye all.